Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette, and we're back for another episode of our podcast. And it was after a nice weekend for Nebraska in a lot of different areas, a big weekend for the basketball team, the men's basketball team ending what was a 7-game losing streak to Northwestern, which I did not realize existed until after the game. And then it was, the Polynesian Bowl highlights. If you haven't checked us out since Friday in the Polynesian Bowl in our live chat. And so, yeah, a lot of recruiting stuff going on. How are you doing this morning, Danny?
Good. I believe it's Northwestern, talking about streaks, Michigan State, and then two other teams who I don't remember.
I think Purdue and Kansas State was one, which I think the Kansas State was dating back even to the days of the Big 12. So some pretty big victories in the past few weeks here for the Nebraska basketball team.
Yeah, for all the ups and downs that they've had this year, and there haven't been too many. I guess Rutgers last week was one. They've put together some solid wins on their resume. But we'll get to basketball in a little bit. I'm not sure if we want to start off with basketball, but that was one of the most exciting things that happened this weekend. But that wasn't the only exciting thing that happened this weekend, especially with the Polynesian Bowl and a glimpse into the future for Nebraska football.
Yeah, we even had some NFL playoffs. I think all the Huskers might be out of it now with the Bucks losing and Trey Palmer and Levante David. Levante David tried, man. He made some great plays. The Bucks really should have thrown the ball to Trey Palmer a couple more times, I thought. But
if Baker could actually kind of throw a little bit better, that might have been possible. But I mean, the problem with Baker is that he's very good at the intermediate and short throws. He's very accurate, but the deep throws, he struggles a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. But at any rate, you guys, before we get into all this Nebraska talk, if you haven't done us the favor already, please hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get in the comment section, hit the like button. Just makes it easier for other people to find our content, and make sure that you guys turn the notifications on so you don't miss any of our future podcasts or live chats or anything like that.
I'm going to be talking about the Packers much longer, that's for sure. Unfortunately, I was happy for Detroit, but I mean, it was a tough one. Not Detroit. Who they play on Saturday again? I'm blanking right now.
The Niners.
Yeah, the Niners. That's right. And as I recall, I think they've lost 3 playoff games in their history to the Niners. So,
yeah, I think it's a few more than that now. They've lost 4 in a row, I believe. But yeah,
that was a good game.
Yeah, it was a good game. Yeah, I'll be thinking about that one for a long time. Just all the different plays. But it's what I always say. Anytime you kick a field goal in the playoffs, you take one step closer to losing. And that's something that Steve Young said, about, I think it was the 93 NFC Championship game. They used to have those NFL films, like classic games, and they would interview guys and they would talk about the games, and they were playing the Dallas Cowboys. And I remember in the first half, they were moving the ball up and down the field, and they kicked field goals. And there was one instance where Steve Young wanted to go for it, and the coach, who was Seifert at the time, they kicked the field goal, and Steve Young said, every time you kick a field goal in a game like that, it's one step closer to losing. And that's how I felt the guy missed the kick late in the game, but you can't settle for, you can't get 4 times inside your opponent's 30 and settle for 3 field goals. You just can't do it. And then expect to beat a team like that. And you saw that with, the Chiefs last night. They got the ball in the Lions got the ball in the end zone. That's just what you got to do. And, we saw that with Nebraska. If you want to swing it back to Nebraska, how many times did Nebraska get inside the red zone and were unable to get the ball in the end zone? And so,
too many to count.
Yeah, too many to count. And so hopefully that does not happen anymore. I feel like, watching Dylan Raiola this weekend, I did get a chance to watch the game a little bit more, and man, he looked good, just smooth in the decision making. And what I really was impressed with the most is just the connection that he had with Carter Nelson. He threw a couple, but Carter Nelson had, I think it was the leading receiver in the game, 3 catches for 66 yards. He had a 30-yarder or a 32-yarder from Raiola, another 20-yarders up the seam, and they had a run-pass option. So I'm feeling really excited about Carter Nelson. Even more excited than I was before after this weekend.
Yeah, we can put the rumors of he only played 8-man football, not the rumors, but the detractors that say he only played 8-man football. Can he hold up, to bed? I think he answered that statement pretty well, and he did a good job. I thought he really did a good job, getting open and establishing that connection with Raiola. And I think it's not going to be the last time we see that connection for sure. And again, like I said on Saturday, just the way the ball comes out of Raiola's hand, it's just so smooth, so effortless. He's got a very good throwing motion. He's very aware in the pocket. So I'm excited for what's to come. And I know people are hesitant about potentially starting a freshman in the opener this coming season, but in comparison to what we've had, he might be the most exciting quarterback we've put under center in quite some time.
Yeah, and I do think that's gonna. He operates so he functions so well, in running the offenses. I thought that was really on display, at the Polynesian Bowl. And yeah, he's gonna, it's gonna be up to this coaching staff, Glenn Thomas and Satterfield and all these guys to get him up to speed. But he's been preparing for this, his entire life. That might be going a little bit far, but
Yeah.
he,
He was a
he's
Nebraska kid who grew up watching the Huskers, and I can guarantee you, especially with his father, he had a dream of playing for Nebraska at least, and uh, he just seems so mature and so ready to take on the spotlight, and that's what we need too.
And he was actually, I should mention, he was co-MVP of the
He was.
Polynesia Bowl with Isaac Wilson, who's Zach Wilson's younger brother.
Who was also
So
really good as
yeah,
well.
he
So
is really good. Yeah, he is a talent. He is a very talented
maybe
kid.
better than Zach. Hopefully, he turns out better than
I mean,
Zach.
Zach
Been
was
a rough road.
Zach was darn good at BYU, just
No,
not.
he was, and I feel like the Jets have failed Zach Wilson to some degree, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's not going to get any better with Mr. Darkness retreat in the quarterback room. So
No, he needs to get away from that. Well, I think at one point, yeah, it was so funny that they were like, he didn't want to start, and then they wanted Zach Wilson to start, and he refused to go to the. Yeah, that's a whole mess. But
if I had to start for the Jets, I would think twice too. The only weapon I really have is Garrett Wilson. So
yeah, that's not a good. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, and Raiola just. Yeah, it's going to be fun. They start practice, or not practice, but they're starting winter workouts this week, enrolling in classes this week. And yeah, just the connection that I think he has with Carter Nelson. It was good for those guys to spend some time together. But yeah, I just think you're right. He's a great leader, Dylan Raiola. He's not I just don't feel like he's about the money, or yeah, I'm sure he is getting a nice NIL paycheck. No question about that. But
and we're
that's not the
human.
reason he came here,
If
though.
there's money attached, we're gonna take it. So you can't even
Yeah.
fault him for the money necessarily.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the reason because he was going to get that wherever he went. So it's not like he was going to get paid more at Nebraska than somewhere else. Wherever he went, he was going to have that type of financial support from the program, I think. So yeah, it's going to be exciting to see him and Daniel Kalen, compete and get after it along with some of these other guys. And we should mention that there's still, Kiana Wilhite is visited this weekend. I think his official visit started yesterday. He's a 3-star. Rivals has him as a 4-star, but he's in the 500s in the 24/7 composite. I think maybe 533. But he's a defensive lineman. Let's see. I was going to say he was committed to Washington, and then or had his letter of intent. He actually signed with Washington, got released because of their coaching changed. He visited Michigan State. He's visiting Nebraska now, so there is obviously some chances. Man, this scholarship. This roster limit. I know we're about 115 right now. I not sure how they're going to add more, but I feel like if they can get this kid done, maybe they can find a way. I don't know if it's going to be another NIL type thing, but what do you think about adding another defensive lineman to this 2024 class?
Well, first I'll say that I'd rather have too many kids and have to cut some of the fat than to have, the local janitor playing defensive end, because we don't have any depth. And no disrespect to janitors, but we've had situations where we've had to struggle with depth, and so I would rather have a lot of depth than to have to, struggle to find pieces. But I love the idea of another edge rusher. I think it's a position in this defense that, that can be very versatile. I mean, you look at a guy like Kai Wallen, for example, and you look at a guy like Stephon Thompson, who I believe could be an edge rusher. Vincent Shavers. So, I think the edge rusher is not just limited to the edge, but can also play a larger role in this defense. And I love, the fact that they're prioritizing edge rushers because we have the defensive line pretty much all set up, right? And now we are starting to fill the edges. That's the mark of a well-rounded defensive line. And, it's just taking care of all the bases again. And that's what Nebraska did in the transfer portal, picking up, Dowdell and the receivers and Bly Hill, just filling in those spots. And now they're starting to, continue to strengthen or look to strengthen the defensive line.
And in terms of this weekend where there was over 30 recruits on campus for Nebraska football, Will Hite was one of them, but he's not really included in that mix. That's 20, 25, and 26 kids, on a big junior day. And it was a pretty productive day overall. You're not expecting, a lot of commitments or anything from this. It's more just, setting the kind of building that relationship, kind of setting things up for the future, getting them back, for the spring game, and then getting them for the official visit this summer, and then locking down commitments. We've seen commitments happen by the spring game. I mean, we had, Gibson Pyle was committed pretty early last year, Willis McGahee. So it does happen. And I mean, right now we've got some 2025 commitments already. But yeah, Roger Gradney. So some exciting news. One of the kids on campus this weekend, Bryson Hayes out of Kansas, Mays, Kansas. He's got a crystal ball prediction from Steve Wiltfong. He's ranked 713 overall in the composite rankings, 5'11", 180. And one thing that's exciting with him that makes him really fit in with what Nebraska wants to do at receiver, he ran the 40 in 4.36. So, that's a pretty, impressive time for that. And let's see. So, yeah, no other crystal balls at this point. And then if you look at, Jackson Cantwell, 5-star tackle, talking about, taking another visit already.
Yeah.
Chase Lofton is, the tight end man. He's really getting recruited. He was on campus. He's talked about how he's going to go to USC, Alabama, Miami, Oklahoma. So he might be like a Carter Nelson in this class. And another guy, Christian Jones, is going to be in that a similar mold where there's a lot of offers for him, but Nebraska seemed to impress him this weekend as well. So I think some positive momentum with 3, tip top targets in, Cantwell, Chase Lofton, and Christian Jones.
And Isaiah Mosey, another big receiver, came to campus this weekend. And, he said some interesting things in this quote here. He said, quote, meaning the coaches, they're hardworking. The coaches are very transparent, very real, and what you see is what you get. You don't get certain recruiting pitches. It's who you want to be here or you don't, and I like that. And they're rebuilding it. It's a chance to get in the program and make your mark. The fans, even the little things. We went to the basketball game, and even if they're good or bad, fans pop out to everything. The support you have in the city of Lincoln was crazy. And I'm not going to read the quote that his father said because it's also very long, but his father was impressed with, what Nebraska had to offer as well. And speaking from, experience, if the parents are impressed, you're headed in the right direction. So, I mean, I would love, for example, Isaiah Mosey. We have a ton of receivers, but I remember Nebraska recruiting him last calendar year, and just the way his speed, again, his athletic ability, from the state of Missouri. It's an area, and I don't know if you kind of caught on to this too last year, Chris, that they really explored. And, they weren't necessarily exploring for, at the time, the 2023 class, but I think they were kind of laying the foundation for the future. And, this could be a case where their hard work, begins to pay off because the future in terms of, last year is right now. And I think Missouri will be an area to watch moving forward. Bill Bush and Mickey Joseph did a good job at the time of building the inroads to Missouri for this current coaching staff, and now it's just about finishing the job.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting about that is that Missouri is kind of the Tigers are thriving right now under Eli Drinkwitz in the SEC, and it's
money. That's why they're thriving. I wonder what's going on there, but
and that's the thing about it is they finally, because St. Louis in that Missouri area has always had a lot of talent, and
Mm,
so Missouri, for whatever reason, is starting to get that. Nebraska's trying to get back in there too, but it's like Missouri is one of those places. It really is, I think, an underrated, recruiting hotbed, and they're starting to take advantage of it now. Like, Luther Burden was a kid that was going to go to Georgia, was a 5-star almost, and they got him to stay home, and so there are some big time players there. I think Nebraska though is starting to establish itself, or if it can, I should say, as a Midwest, power again as a winner. I think there's a lot of really good players in that Missouri area that they could get. So I like that. And yeah, Christian Jones, one quote I saw, wanted to throw in there because he's been to Nebraska a bunch of times, but he said that this visit was the best visit yet, according to what he told Greg Smith of Rivals. So, I mean, that I think shows right there that the staff is doing a great job on these recruiting visits. They're building momentum with a lot of these in-state players too. And
mm.
yeah, Nebraska doesn't, they don't try to necessarily sell you and say, hey, like you're going to come and play here and do this or whatever. It really is more about like, are you a fit for this culture? This is what we are. This is what it's going to be. Do you want to come here? I like that Matt Rule is very transparent about it, and he, is like, yeah, this place isn't for everybody, but if you want to be here, like we want you to be here. So yeah, I like what they're doing. But yeah, they don't, they're not selling, they're not selling fake. They're the real deal. And yeah, I mean Garrett McGuire and all these guys, he's doing a great job, and I love the recruiting and just how hungry these guys are, on the recruiting trail.
And you mentioned that this coaching staff doesn't sell fake. Fake is what I believe drove Raiola out of Georgia. I believe he was made promises and things like that from Kirby Smart, and they didn't follow through. And now he's with Nebraska, so kids can smell BS when it's happening. And these kids aren't naive; they all know how to play the recruiting game. And I think Nebraska's done a good job also of getting kids to commit on campus while they're there and making the most of these visits. In previous coaching staffs, you would get recruits on campus, and some of them you would never hear from again. Now you're starting to see follow-up visits, official visits, and even commitments when they come back on campus, and that speaks a lot to the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, Matt Rule has a plan for everything.
Yeah.
Everything is meticulous. I mean, even people they had the snow, where the end was out in the middle of the field, and somebody was talking about how they had the extra path there, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure Matt Rule has a reason for that. He's got a reason for everything that he does. So yeah, that's just what his recruiting strategy. It's like we've talked about this a number of times, but if they have their board, they miss somebody and they pivot quickly if it doesn't go. I mean, they're constantly. It's just if you notice it, and he's talked about it, like we want to win every day, and they will, if they have something that goes negatively against them on the recruiting trail, like they go and find a positive and they get things kind of turned around, and it is that thing, like it is just perception a lot with recruiting, but perception is reality too, and they're Matt Rule, I think, understands that, and I just love that competitive fire that he's got, and he's just a perfect fit for Nebraska. The fact that he, was taking his daughter to basketball games, and, they're supporting the volleyball team and wrestling matches and softball and whatever. And, like it's just that stuff too. He really enjoys that, and it's not fake. You can tell that he generally respects and admires these other athletes, and kind of fosters that culture of support, not just for the football program, but for other athletes. And I think that that's a great thing too for the entire University of
Yeah.
Nebraska.
Yeah, he's not afraid to be visible, and he's not afraid to meet and interact with fans, and I think that goes a long way too. I mean, say what you want about this past season, but he's taking all the right steps to be as accessible as a Division I football head coach can be, and I think that goes a really long way.
Yeah, and trying not to choke on the rule aid right now, the Nebraska Kool-Aid, but the roster's looking pretty good. It will be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I mean, with the NIL and if there's more transfers with some of these guys, but I mean, they got it figured out. I mean, I'm just not that worried about it. Matt Rule doesn't seem worried about it, so I'm not going to worry about it.
No, I wasn't worried about it. Like I was, I admit after the Iowa game, I was a little bit worried. I mean, we were all freaking out, calling him Scott Frost 2.0, and me looking at the schedule, being like, "How the heck are we going to do this?" But again, they had a plan, starting with bricks, and then Raiola a little bit later, and so it seems like even when the chips are down, they've always got something cooking, and yeah, so I'm excited to see what they do for the 2025 class. I think the 2025 class is probably not going to be as good as 2024, but I still think it's going to be really, really solid. And I'll be curious to see what they do in the quarterback room for the future classes as well, because I think they're identifying some targets there as well. I mean, we talked about the kid from Pennsylvania last week, Matt Zollers, and so it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the quarterback room because having Raiola and having Kalen, allows you stability there. And then from that point, you start to get to, what better programs do and just continue to stack good quarterbacks in the room. So, I mean, if we can get to that point, I mean, that would be impressive in of itself. And I'll be curious to see what they do for a third quarterback, after Raiola and Kalen leave the program.
And I mean, you have to, not to get too far ahead, but you have to feel like if things go well with Nebraska and Dylan Raiola, if he plays well and, if it goes how we all hope, and I mean, you have to think that they're the odds-on favorite to get Dayton Raiola. I mean, I would just think that, it just makes sense. I mean, it's possible, sure, that he go, but I always thought that it seemed like there was a better chance that he went to Nebraska anyway. I mean, it just seems like, I don't know, maybe that's just a misread of things, but I think if Nebraska does right by Dylan Raiola, I think they're going to have a very good chance of getting Dayton Raiola, and he's going to be a stud too. So yeah, that's a great
he's actually
point of bringing that stability to the QB room. And I mean, the reason, looking back at it, the reason we were freaking out going into next season is because we didn't have answers at the quarterback position, right? And we're like, man, if this team doesn't get a quarterback, like, what are we going to do if we're stuck with Chuba Purdy or
we really were freaking out?
Yeah, because it's like. I mean, because this year there's no way that this team should have won 5 games. I mean, it's just like if you looked at
they should have won 2 at most, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they should have. Yeah, and they definitely should have been playing for a bowl game and had a winning record. Like if you just looked at, like if you took all the raw numbers and put them into a machine and didn't look at like the end results and just the stats and everything, like where they led the conference in rushing yardage, they were top 2 or 3 in defensive rushing yardage. They were one of the top teams in sacks, total defense. I mean, all those those are all such positive categories, but just the negative of the turnovers, like that cancels all of it out. So that was my thing: is how are you going to finally fix that turnover problem? And I mean, Matt Rule talked about it. And it's not just the quarterbacks. I mean, people were fumbling the ball too, although not quite as much the running back. A lot of those fumbles were from Heinrich, and Heinrich had to probably run too much because of some of the injuries and stuff. But
Harburg would run and get absolutely blasted in the backfield, barely be able to get up, and then go and take another snap. So shout out to him, because I get what Satterfield was trying to do with the run design plays, because he couldn't really throw it too well at some points, and we didn't have a ton at receiver, but man, he took some hits. So I think
he did.
So I think by that point, it started to creep in, like, man, I'm going to get hit again, and I don't blame him. He took a beating, and he served well, despite all of the issues with turnovers and the end record.
Yeah, man, he still won us some games, but going back to, I mean, if they don't get Raiola, I mean, they're getting Kyle McCord. Like that's the reason that move didn't happen. And so, I mean, not that, I mean, I would definitely take Raiola every day of the week, just, for the future. But I mean, if you get Kyle McCord, you're at least you're not winning 5 games. I think he's a good enough quarterback with that defense. I mean, he's not going to turn the football over 25 times. He turned it over 6 times last year, and if Nebraska, like we talked about, if Nebraska had a quarterback that could turn it over only 6 times, like even this year, if Dylan Raiola, if that's literally the only thing he does is takes care of the football, this team will win like 8 games. I absolutely 100% believe that.
And we're gonna have
the schedule is not that tough. It really isn't. I mean, there's tough games on there, but like you look at it, and there's a lot of games now. I mean, yeah, we're probably underestimating USC a little bit because the end of last season. It's not going to be easy to beat those guys, but like I look at Ohio State's the one game I look in the schedule. I'm like, I don't know if we could win that one, but every other one I think is winnable. Seriously.
Ohio State has done really well in the transfer portal, so they're going to be loaded next year. But
they do realize they can only play one quarterback at a time, right?
Yeah, but it's good to have options, and And I think the first 6 on our schedule are entirely winnable. All at home too, which is
Yeah,
nice.
it is nice. I keep forgetting the schedule. So yeah, UTEP, Colorado at
Win,
home, Northern Iowa,
win,
and then
win.
Illinois. I guess the first, yeah. So Purdue's on the road. So 1, 2. So the first 4 at home. So
Oh,
5
4.
out of the, yeah, and then
Still not bad.
yeah. Then we got at Purdue, home against Rutgers, then at Indiana, at Ohio State, UCLA at home, Wisconsin at home, at Iowa, and at USC. So I mean, yeah, there's at Iowa, at USC, and at Wisconsin, at Ohio State are probably the 3 toughest games. And
And
then
honestly, Wisconsin's kind of tough too. They just got Tyler Van Dyke, who wasn't really properly utilized, I think, at Miami, and he regressed a little bit, but he's still a good quarterback. And Wisconsin always plays us tough. I mean, we saw it last year, so that's no gimme game either.
And we've talked about how much when we actually have an offensive line and a running game, how much that can help a quarterback. So the fact that Tyler Van Dyke's probably not going to be asked to do as much as he was at Miami will probably help. So yeah, that's not going to be an easy one. And UCLA isn't either. Although I did see, I don't know if you saw this, an interesting report that NFL teams are talking to Chip Kelly about being their offensive coordinator. That would be something to leave UCLA to be an offensive coordinator. But I guess leaving before you get fired is always something. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you saw. Speaking of leaving, before you get in trouble or get fired, we saw Pete Carroll do that when he went to Seattle. So it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it would be really interesting to see.
Pete
But
Carroll left pretty quickly when he went to go to Seattle, so it can happen.
but that would be, because man, it's so late in the process. Like who would UCLA even hire? So that'll be interesting to see if that kind of goes through. But that was a report that I saw pop up yesterday. But I mean, yeah, a lot of winnable games. I'm not saying that Nebraska couldn't struggle, and I mean they could struggle still to get,
Yeah.
They could very well be in that 6 to 8 win range, which would be a huge step forward still. But you look at it. The thing I like though is, every game on our schedule, like no more is there a massive gap at quarterback. Like there wasn't, when we go to play like Ohio State and USC and blah, 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 whoever, like one of the biggest differences was always that they had some, dominant quarterback. I mean, Ohio State had CJ Stroud, and who did we have? Adrian Martinez or, Casey Thompson or whoever. I mean, I'm
Justin
not,
Fields.
yeah. And I'm not
for
trying to
Ohio
say
State.
that as a slight on those guys, right? But like, there's a difference there. And those quarterbacks, I mean, yeah, look at Justin Fields. Look at the difference that he made for that program. So, I mean, like if we have a quarterback like that, it opens up a world of possibilities that didn't exist before.
And also, when you have a competent defense, like I remember, and I always keep
Yeah.
going back to this on here, I know, but it just sticks out in my mind so vividly. The ESPN Ohio State game in 2019, and Chase Young and that defensive line was absolutely dominant. And then you had J.K. Dobbins going full Madden mode, just running everywhere. And then you had Justin Fields with an absolute cannon for an arm. And it didn't end well for us, but it kind of gave you an idea of this is where we need to be. And, we need to recruit better. And it never got better under Scott Frost. But, I mean, the blueprint was there for a successful Big Ten team. And that 2019 Ohio State team, that was man, I just remember watching it. I'm like, is this game over yet? I want to write and go to bed. So it was fun to watch as a football fan, but not as a Nebraska fan. I remember talking with you, and not too many happy faces that night.
No, not too many, but there were some happy faces this weekend at the Vault. Let's get to some basketball talk here for the last few minutes of the show. A big victory for Nebraska basketball. I mean, they lost 2 in a row. A couple on the road. They were looking at 3 and 4 in the conference, and there were some dicey moments, man. I mean, they had an 11-point lead in the second half and shrunk, but they came up. That was a huge shot by Keisei Tominaga, and that's not. What's funny about it is that's not like the shot that most coaches probably would want you to take in that situation.
I was just kind of like,
up to early in the shot clock, but you know what? Like that, I bet Fred's like, no, yes, like one of those. And hell, man, if you make it, like that's the thing though. Casey is not. He's never seen a shot that he's not afraid of, and that paid off on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think you very rarely hear me say this, but I think Coach needs to play his son more. His son is a great defender,
Yeah.
and he's always active in the passing lanes, and he brings that grittiness to the team that the team has been missing, but had been missing prior to Fred's arrival, and I just looked at this game, and it was another strong performance from C.J. Wilcher. Wilcher, I think, had 10 points overall, and he came off the bench, and he shot really well. He provided a nice, one of those days where he did just enough to keep Nebraska in it and, hold the lead at some points. But Wilcher's been playing really good basketball, and I know he probably wants to start, but he functions very well off the bench as well.
Yeah, he does. I've been so impressed with what he's done this season. He gave 27, big minutes off the bench. And yeah, I mean, Josiah leaked 15 points and 5 rebounds,
Yeah.
Took advantage. That was an interesting thing with Northwestern is they don't have a ton of size, but they obviously, shoot the ball well and have a lot of guards. So it was kind of an interesting matchup. And Nebraska had to take advantage of that inside, and they did. It was interesting. They did this 3-point defense, which drives me crazy, but Nebraska's 3-point defense is horrible. I don't know why. I'm wondering, just watching it on the rotations, it sometimes seem a step slow. And I just, sometimes they are playing those big lineups. I mean, you don't see it as many teams play 2 actual bigs like Nebraska does. And so that's kind of hurt. I mean, they're allowing almost 11 3-pointers per game in Big Ten play, so they got to get that reduced a little bit at some point. But Saturday was the first time that a team has made more 3-pointers than them when they've actually won the game. They were 0-4 in Big Ten play prior to that, so I'm glad that they were able to figure that out. But that's been the biggest issue, I would think, with their defense. Ohio State coming in here on Tuesday to the Vault, and that's I mean, they're 13-5, Ohio State, but they're not as good as their record shows. I mean, they just lost to Michigan, which is probably the worst team in the Big Ten right now. And so this is another game that it's a must win. It's just you can't, you just can't miss these types of games. That was like with Northwestern on Saturday. Like, they're a good team, but if you're gonna make the NCAA tournament, you just have to win these games. If Nebraska wins on Tuesday, they're 15-5 and 5-4 in the Big Ten, and that's right, where you want to be in terms of making March Madness.
The rotation point you made is very interesting because they struggled with it against Wisconsin, and that killed them. And it seems like they focus a lot of their attention inside, which has also kind of been a problem for them this year. But as soon as you get to the perimeter, people are wide open. So I'll be interested to see what they do in terms of rotating defensively. And Josiah Alik did a good job of figuring out the Northwestern rotations defensively and just taking advantage. I really liked to see him do that, and he's been able to really put together some solid games. I mean, even in the loss against Iowa, last week or a couple weeks ago, he did a good job of establishing his presence inside, and so it'll be interesting to see if he takes on a larger role in this offense moving forward because he's proven to be, extremely reliable over these past couple games.
Yeah, and stepping in for Juwan Gary, who he did get some positive news. He's day-to-day. It's not clear if he's going to return tomorrow night or not, but it's good that he'll be back, sooner rather than later. So good vibes right now for Nebraska basketball. The wrestling team got a nice dual win over Purdue on Sunday. Nash Hutchmaker didn't get a pin, but he did get, I think, a 4-0 decision. So that was pretty impressive to notch a shutout. I'm trying to think what else. The Nebraska basketball women's team, they dropped a game to Penn State on Sunday. So, they're kind of in that bubble mix as well. So, yeah, I think it's been a good weekend all around for the Huskers. And, hopefully we can kind of keep things rolling on the court tomorrow, especially with Nebraska hoops team.
Yeah. This January stretch, I can't believe January is almost over, but this stretch has been a little bit of a up and down month, but it's something we expected. We've always said that anybody can beat anybody on any given night in Big Ten play, and now it's up to Nebraska to close out the month of January strong over this last stretch here, because I believe they only have, after the Ohio State game, one more game in January, and then it's on to February.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. This tournament and the season's going to be over before we know it. We're really getting into the stretch run a bit. So hopefully these Huskers get back to the NCAA tournament and get us our first ever win. That would be awesome, but still a long way to go. But we'll be following it the entire way. And so make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button. Follow us for all of our recruiting content. Make sure you check out HuskerBigRed.com too. We have a lot of great stuff there. And you know what? It's totally free. You don't have to pay a dime to get it. So check that out for a lot of great news and opinion and analysis on everything Nebraska Cornhuskers. And we'll be back on Wednesday. And as always, guys, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.